Hi, and welcome to Whole Soul School and Foundation's Fireside Chats with Lacy, Frazer, and Marie Mohler. I'm Marie Mohler, and I'm an author, artist, and intuitive counselor, and I'm a co-founder of Whole Soul School and Foundation. Lacy is a clinical psychologist by training and a practicing life and leadership coach today. So today we're going to be talking about a great film called Thoughts Become Things. The creator of that film and the narrator of that film is a man by the name of Mike Dooley. And the film opens by Mike Dooley sharing some stories from his life, and he starts with his childhood, that illustrate experiences that he had with creating things through his thoughts. So one of the first scenarios, Lacy, that I love this story is he tells a story when he was a young boy, and I think he's in a camp with his sister, and it's a horse riding camp, and there's going to be a horse show at the end of the camp. And so he clearly has a passion, and he's seeing himself. He wants to win. He wants to win the horse show. And so on the day of the first show, they're all lined up. All the kids are on their horses and they're all lined up. And he sees himself as being the winner. And I guess the announcer announces all the winner of the show. And he finds out that he won 6th place out of 6 horse riding students. And so that spurs in him a greater desire actually, of how can I win? How can I get the blue ribbon? How can I get first place? And so he tells the story. He has a conversation with his mom who tells him some key things he needs to do if he wants to be in that first place. And one of those things was praying and visualizing with all of his senses him actually receiving the first place award. And he does that every night. And this is his first experience, I think, with creative visualization. And so, Lacy, I love his enthusiasm, how Mike Dooley tells the story about himself. And so, but he does that. He practices this visualization. He does some of the things that his mom mentions to him. And lo and behold, he becomes the first place winner. And to him, that was confirmation that something about what he was doing worked. Something about what he was thinking actually manifested that he got the first prize winning. So there's a second scenario that he talks about in the film of where he witnesses his thoughts becoming things. And so in this experience, he describes he's obviously an adult. He's talking about his job as an accountant with Price Waterhouse, and he's in a position where he would like to rise up the corporate ladder. He would like a better position in the company, and he has absolutely no idea how that's going to happen. And the way he tells the story, at least from my memory, is that he's not super skilled in his job, right? So he's not quite sure he has the skills to do his job, and yet he wants to have a different, better position in the company. And so what I love about how he tells the story, he has no idea how he's going to move into a better position. He has no idea how that could even happen. But he remembers some of his experiences, including that horse show when he was younger. And he focuses on the end result of being at the top. And he makes this point again and again, how he did not know how he was going to get there, but he keeps visioning the end result. And the end result became his experience. And he gives some wonderful details about what had to happen to make that happen. But his job was to visualize the end result, to show to himself that his thoughts literally became things. So I think he has many wonderful examples in the movie, but I think that just gets us started is listening to Mike Dooley tell his experiences, Lacy. And so maybe you want to add some insights to that.
Well, yeah. Good morning. Good morning, Marie. And good morning, everybody. One of the reasons I love this film and I love Mike Dooley's delivery of this concept is because it's actually quite simple. The entire film gives some step-by-step instructions on really how to visualize and how to manifest in a way that other people have not been able to kind of narrow it down into an easy way to understand it. So I just want to say overall, I love this film for that reason, and I used it a lot in my teachings because it was so simple and easy to understand. So yes, he opens the film with some of his own stories on how he became to know the power of thought, and how we think is so incredibly important, because we are creating our reality through our thoughts. And his examples of the horse show and his examples of working his way up the ladder are great examples of using thought to create a different reality. But at the same time, he has such an innocence about him. He didn't really know what he was doing when he was doing that. And I know you and I can relate to that a lot. We can relate to that a lot. But I want to take out, some of the three key things that I took out of this initial part of the film where he talks about his own experiences. The first was the concept of praying with all the senses. So we've talked in our first Fireside Chat and with my Fireside Chat with Kevin Foster about the concept of visualizing, and what Mike Dooley talks about here is this praying with all the senses.
And in his world, it was praying. So when he was praying as a child, visualizing him winning that first place. But you can substitute, if people who are not people who pray, it's imagining with all your senses.
Well, that's what
right?
I was going to say, was that, prayer is another word for visualizing in a way, and it's one way people tap into the energy of the universe.
Yes.
And so when we visualize, when we imagine something that we desire or that we want to create in our life, it could be in the form of prayer, or it could be in the form of just pretending and imagining and visualizing. But the key ingredient here is doing it with all of our senses. And what that means is that when we close our eyes and we visualize something, we aren't just seeing it as a snapshot in and of itself. We're also feeling it. We're smelling the environment that is the environment we are envisioning. We are touching it, we are tasting it, we are using all of our senses in our imagining of that particular object or relationship or experience that we're wanting to have.
We're fully engaged in the experience of it, as if we are experiencing it,
exactly.
as if we're having it.
Yes. It's kind of almost like, I'm not a video game player or know much about virtual reality, but in a way it sort of feels like that experience to me, that you're going in and you're really living it. You're living the experience that you want to have. And I liked how he, just using his words, praying with all the senses. That's just, to me, a metaphor for imagining with all the senses, living as if with all the senses.
Well, and I would say playing with all the senses.
Yes.
You really have to allow yourself to come to life for the visualization process to work, and for your thoughts to become things. You really want to be really feeling those feelings, right, and smelling those smells and doing all those things. And I would say, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this today, Lacy, but, we do this all the time. We're doing this all the time. And so when we're talking with our friends, or we're telling the story of something that happened to us yesterday with a lot of emotion and a lot of energy, and we're really feeling it when we're telling the story, we may not know, but we're actually giving commands to the universe that we want more of all that we're telling about, all that we're sharing about, all that we're feeling about, right? That's a visualization, whether we know it or not, past or future.
Right.
Right? That's a visualization.
Right. And a side note, which we'll probably talk about later, is that's so important to know about, because we're doing that in a negative way too.
Right.
Whatever we're talking about, if we're gossiping, if we're complaining, if we're, having a pity party, all of that is speaking to the universe and is going to expand more experiences
Those are the visions we're letting the universe know that we want to be experiencing.
Right.
Whether we know it or not, those are the laws of the universe. They're listening to our thoughts. They're listening to our words.
And so when we know this
Yes.
powerful information, we can then choose what we are thinking about.
Yes.
Right? And what we are imagining and what we are putting our energies into. And it's crucial. It's crucial. I have one really brief example. We're going to talk about a lot of examples today, but there was one example. Actually, just recently, I was at the gym and I was working out on the elliptical machine, which I do with my eyes closed because I can't have all the stimuli of the TV in front of me, because it's so distracting. And I had my eyes closed, and that night, so this was in the morning, that night I was going to be conducting a interview with somebody for our documentary that we are beginning to make, which again, I think we'll talk about later. But, and I was on the elliptical and I had music blaring and my eyes were closed and I was focused on staying balanced on the machine. But I started to actually totally have this interview with this person in my mind and in my mind's eye while I was on the elliptical. And all the questions that I knew I wanted to ask came to me, and we were having this great conversation. And sure enough, that night, I just had a fantastic interview, and it was I can feel I had already had it.
Right.
Exactly. And that was a really...
You had already had it.
Yes.
Exactly.
And so when I actually was having it, it was just so natural. It was just doing what had already been done.
Exactly.
If that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense.
So that was just one quick example of that. So one of the points that I pulled out of the very beginning of this film was quote unquote praying with all the senses, or imagining with all the senses. The second thing he talks about is the concept of only focusing on the end result. When you are visioning and when you are imagining and you are pretending and you are seeing what it is that you want, you only want to focus on the end result and not worry about how you're going to get there. And that's a big concept that we are going to talk about later. And the third thing that I pulled out of his initial beginning as he was learning how to do this as a kid and as a young adult was the concept of making a scrapbook about the things that he desired. And today we might call that a vision board, in which we cut out images or we paint things or we do things that represent what it is we are wanting to create in our lives in the future. And it helps us get into the feeling of that. So I know people who do vision board workshops, and I've attended some of those. And I know, Marie, you and I have made many vision boards over the years.
Yes.
I think at one point we counted them, and I think we had like 13 vision boards over the last 15 years.
Yes, because as the visions changed or grew, the vision boards needed to change to reflect that.
Well, and as the vision as we manifested into form what was on the vision board,
that's why they changed.
I know, exactly. So we would
Right?
have a vision board, and we'd have maybe 8 things on them, and once it was done, we had brought everything into our reality that we had visioned. That vision board got folded up and put in the closet, and we created a new one.
Yes.
As those visions changed.
Right. As our lives upgraded, so did our vision boards.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly. And I think it's worth telling one story here. One of my favorite visions that we had that we brought into reality was a beach house. I had always wanted a beach house for our family, not because I needed to have a second home, but because I wanted a place for us to take the kids when they were a lot smaller during the summer or even, throughout the year. And I had wanted this for a long time. Both you and I grew up at the beach, so we knew we both had the feeling of the beach in our energy field, I think, and had wanted that for our kids. So I remember going through magazines. I remember cutting out the beach house. I remember putting it on the vision board, and I remember talking about the beach house with you over and over and over again for a lot of the early part of our relationship.
It was a fun vision to manifest. We had fun talking about it.
Yes, and that's
Right.
really key. I mean, we have fond memories of the beach ourselves, and then when we were thinking about wanting to have a place for our children to have that same kind of fun,
Right.
it just the joy in it kind of built.
It was easy.
It was easy, and we had no idea how we were going to find the money to buy a second home
Right.
at the time. But we put our energies into this vision.
And focusing on the end result in this scenario that we're describing was very easy, because to have the vision we wanted, we had to have the beach house. That
Right.
was the end result.
Right, exactly. And it was easy to see a house near the beach.
and us being at the beach all the time.
Exactly. And I don't know how many months it was after. I mean, we dabbled in talking about a beach house for several years, but when we put it on that vision board and we really put our energy into it,
we were in the understanding, to use Mike Dooley's language, at that time when we put it on the vision board very consciously, we knew that thoughts become things. So we went from just talking about it and having fun and being playful with that to actually letting the universe know that this was in our sights and this is what was in our hearts. And
this was something we really wanted to focus on.
Yes.
So we got very clear about the vision.
Yes.
Very clear about the focus. And several weeks, maybe months after we did that, I ran into a friend of mine who I had not seen, who I grew up with, a childhood friend of mine who I grew up with, who I had not seen in probably 35 years. And I ran into him at Costco of all places. I mean, and literally literally ran into him and dropped something on the floor. And when I went down to pick it up, I came up and he looked at me and he said, "Lacy?" And it was an unbelievable serendipitous sort of meeting. And we started talking and, of course, stayed at Costco for like an hour and a half catching up on each other's lives. But what very quickly he told me was that he was a mortgage broker. So we started talking about houses and things like that. And very quickly the conversation led to, we wanted to buy a beach house. And he said, "Well, I can tell you how to buy a beach house." And he met with you and I, and he told us how we could refinance our current house and use the equity in our home to buy a beach house.
He proceeded to give you the answer of the how that was not our job to know.
Exactly.
It was his job or the universe's job to bring that into form.
Right.
And there he was.
Right. I mean, it was to these kind of instances feel like miracles. They feel like magic. And that's when you play with the universe, that's how it feels.
The universe plays with you.
And we will talk about not worrying about how it's going to happen. And it's really critical to not worry about how it's going to happen. And I had no idea and could never have predicted that the person I would run into at this time in my life would be an old friend who wanted to help us, who could figure out the magical way to use the money we already had invested in our home to buy a second home at the beach. And that's exactly what we did. And within, 6 months, 8 months, we were proud owners of a beautiful little yellow beach house. And it was a wonderful experience.
It was. It was.
And we had that beach house for 4 years until we decided to sell it because it was a lot of work.
Well, it was a lot of work, and our vision had moved on.
Right.
So the visions that we were having of our family at the beach house and having all those experiences, which in fact we did have. So our kids played at the beach and we went down on weekends and we went a lot and we really enjoyed our time there. And we also had to do some work at the house, right? Because houses require upkeep. But this call to purpose was always calling us. And for us, there came a time of a choice where we keep enjoying ourselves at the beach house and we keep going and doing all that requires, or we were going to put our energy into bringing these messages out into the world the way that we're doing now. And so that call to purpose at a particular point in time became the priority. And so we did. We sold that beach house, but we had that personal satisfaction. We both still smile about it today, that was like a perfect manifestation in a perfect window of time. And it doesn't mean that the things that we manifest, we have to keep doing them forever and ever and ever, because we're creators. We're conscious creators. And so we have new desires and new dreams that we want to manifest, and things that we successfully manifested, we may have received all the marrow of that experience, which I think we did.
Well, I think we certainly had to show ourselves that we could do it.
Yeah.
And we had prior to that, we had manifested a lot of smaller things pretty easily.
Yeah.
And once we got into the groove of how this works and got into the groove of working with the energies of the universe, we were able to manifest something big, and that was this house. And
yeah.
And I kind of chuckle. I kind of chuckle too, because the next time I would have, or if I could go back, I would have also manifested a caretaker and a gardener and a repair person and all the money in the world to keep those people on.
Well, you get to be a better and better visioner because you learn from the things that you visioned previously successfully. I would add this in the next time.
Yes.
And so we are seasoned visioners at this point.
Yes.
And that was a big practice session for ourselves. That was a big dream that we had, something that seemed like we had no idea how it was going to happen. And yet the universe co-created with us a way to make it so.
Right.
So,
and we have many
which is
stories
fantastic.
like that. And that's a good segue into what Mike Dooley does sort of next in the film is he really breaks down the specific explanation of his version of visualization guidelines. And he outlines basically 6 steps to the visualization process.
Okay.
And the first step is he talks about visualizing, having a clear vision of what it is you're trying to manifest or wanting to manifest no more than once a day. So basically taking a small amount of time and visualizing, spending focused time once a day on that vision. And there are reasons why it's important that it's only once a day.
Yeah, because he's talking about when you discover this process, when you realize that your thoughts are creating your life, there's a part of you, there's a natural tendency to be like, I'm going to do it all day. I'm going to think about it all the time. Because if I do it more often, then it's going to come quicker. But in fact, what Mike Dooley says, and I've seen this happen in my own life and in our life, Lacy, is it's oftentimes when you put that much enthusiasm into it, you can start to overwhelm yourself. Or you can actually find yourself disappointed. There's this...
Because it creates expectation.
It creates a tremendous amount of expectation versus something that you do as a natural part of your day. It's just something you do every day it's like you take a walk every day, you go to the gym every day. You don't go to the gym 15 times. You don't go to the gym 80 times because you love how you feel when you're working out and you feel fit. You go once. Maybe twice. But Mike Dooley's saying he recommends no more than once a day.
Absolutely. And I also think, just to add on to that, it can also create kind of this energetic and emotional resistance to what it is you want, which is in the end puts it farther away. Again, because if you spend so much time on it, the expectation is building. And then when it doesn't come, it creates disappointment. And now you're in resistance to what it is you're actually wanting.
Yeah, somehow, I'm not quite sure all the metaphysical mechanics of it, but when you overdo it, when you put so much emphasis on it, you're almost creating a vacuum that's working against the vision. So these are our words, not Mike Dooley's words. He keeps it really simple and says, just do it once a day.
Right, exactly. And that leads into sort of the second point, which is he says, when you choose that moment in time during your day to do this, that you only do it for 5 to 10 minutes max. And he makes a great point about why that is, because, our world is so full of distractions. And also, if we are in the energy of this for more than 10 minutes a day, we are at risk for daydreaming. And he talks about the concept of daydreaming. Like if we sit and we imagine and we vision, and that can lead into kind of take us off into all kinds of directions.
Right. We sort of get off the mark of what we're trying to tell the universe and remember with all of our senses. It's a very active process that you're engaging in this once a day for 5 to 10 minutes a day. And so, when you do it for 5 to 10 minutes, you can maintain your focus in all of your senses on the vision you're wanting to feel and dream and visioning about. But longer than 5 to 10 minutes, it sounds like in Mike Dooley's experience, it becomes more of a distraction and you can go into all kinds of tunnels of visions for your life with yourself. But you're not quite as, I don't know what the word is, Lacy, but you're not quite as sharp. And you start to move away from what you're actually trying to achieve in this very efficient sensory manner.
Well, you and I use the term laser focused a lot. And when you want to be laser focused on something, you have to be focused on it and only it. And when you start to expand the vision, or you start to daydream, or you get distracted from the vision, you lose that focus.
And the universe is listening to all of those distractions.
Right.
And so when you're putting out some of these distracted thoughts, I mean, it might be like, oh, right, I have to go to the store today. You're visioning, but if you vision for longer than 5 to 10 minutes, you start thinking about other things that the universe is also listening to.
Right.
So you want to make sure when you put in that 5 to 10 minutes of quality time into your visualization every day, then you let it go. You've put in your time, and he says you've already made your mark. He says more time is simply unnecessary.
Right, exactly. Exactly. And the third guideline that he talks about, which is incredibly important, and you and I talk about this a lot, is to include every conceivable detail in the vision. That you can, so in that 5 to 10 minutes, when you are laser focused on this visualization, you are including every kind of detail you can about this vision. So I remember when we were manifesting this house that we live in now, that we talked about the last time, we envisioned every detail about the outside and the inside and the kids and what was going to happen in that house. When we visioned the beach house, it was the same way. What color is it? How big is it? How small is it? How many rooms are there? How big is the yard? How big is the driveway? What is, what kind of condition is it in?
Right?
Are there trees? How close is it to the beach?
But he would even say, when you're visioning it, he would say, just vision yourself already in the house and add those details of, you hear seagulls flying over, right? What are other things that you hear and smell at the beach?
Right, using all those senses.
Using all of the senses as if you're already there.
Right.
So, again, it's important to remember that when you're putting in this quality 5 to 10 minutes a day, you're already in the experience of having it. So you're smelling the smells, you're hearing the sounds, you're, in the salt air, the wind is coming off the ocean, right? You're almost in a commercial with yourself, right? And it gets to be so much fun when you add in those details. So play with it, enjoy it, and stay focused on very specifically what you're summoning from the universe.
Yeah, this reminds me of one of the ways we learned about this particular guideline was when we manifested one of our cats. I don't know if you want to tell that story briefly.
Yeah. Well, we at the time we were considering expanding our family and bringing in a new furry family member. We already had one cat, and that one cat wasn't very playful. And the kids were sad because we did have a family pet, but it wanted nothing to do with most anybody else. So when we were visioning, but we knew these principles, and when we were visioning bringing in a new animal into our home, we visioned this wonderful cat that was super friendly, that could be picked up by kids, and it was easygoing and just pretty chill. Yeah, that's what we wanted, is a family-friendly cat versus just a cat that's in our family, because we already had that. We had a cat that was in our family. So anyway, when we visioned this cat, we visioned all the feelings of the kids being able to lay with the cat and play with the cat, and the cat was completely tolerant of all of this behavior and actually enjoyed having that kind of deep, everyday connection with our kids. So that was part of the vision. And when we went to the animal shelter to pick out a cat, of course, what happened is we didn't get one cat that day, but we got two. So we became a family of 3 cats. But one of the cats, part of what when we were visioning this feeling of this cat that was just going to be totally family friendly, easygoing, loved our kids, loved being handled and picked up and touched and loved and rubbed. When we were picturing that, one of the things, once he arrived home, he came home sick. So as soon as we got him home from the shelter, we realized he was actually very, very sick. And he was only 2 months old. He was a teeny tiny little thing. And he wasn't healthy. And he clearly looked like he wasn't going to make it, actually. And that was a whole other journey we had to go through. But immediately I knew, gosh, we spent so much time visioning how friendly and easygoing and chill he was, which he totally was.
Which he was, right.
His personality matched exactly what we had visioned in that regard. But we didn't even think to write in that we adopted a healthy cat. Right? A strong cat, a cat with a lot of life force, and they came home perfectly. And so that has always been kind of a note to self for me in my visioning process. And as I've learned, and in fact, we ended up getting a dog after that a few years later. But in that experience, I knew that we manifested a healthy dog, a healthy puppy, because that other people might enjoy nurturing, animals back to health, and that might be a vision for someone else, so it's not wrong. But for our family, with everything else we have going on, when we bring an animal into our house, we learned that you have to put that on your vision board too. Put in every detail you can think of, just to make the vision be as close to what you actually want to be living as possible, because your thoughts are literally becoming those things.
Yes, I love that story because it was really one of those teaching stories for us.
Yes.
So we talked about guideline number 1 is you visualize no more than once a day. Guideline number 2, you only visualize for 5 to 10 minutes and no longer. Guideline number 3 is you consider and include every conceivable detail to your vision. And guideline number 4 is that and this is a super important one. I feel like I've said that about every one of them, but this is a super important one. Guideline number 4 is visualize with emotion. And I love how Mike Dooley says this supercharges, it turbocharges the manifestation of the vision. And the reason, and we know this from quantum physics, and we know this from what we've shared in previous podcasts, that emotion is really energy in motion. And the stronger and the more emotionally charged vision we can have, the quicker that vision is going to manifest into reality.
Yes, and I think Mike Dooley actually even makes this point, which tells you how important number 4 is that some people, there are some people who aren't very visual. And he said, if you're one of those people, number 4 is your answer. This number 4 of feeling with that emotion, because it's the emotion that the universe is really listening to. So if you can feel with extrasensory feelings and all of that emotion, that it almost takes care of the other part of the visualizing if that's something that's more difficult for you to do. So that absolutely, I have felt that turbocharge visions myself. And I can tell on some other visions where, the beach house was fun to manifest. Manifesting a new cat was fun to manifest. We've manifested cars. We've manifested many other things that were fun to manifest. But think about things like taxes, where you don't want to have a big tax bill at the end of the year. It's not so much fun to visualize your tax bill and that process, right? And so there are things that sometimes we need to manifest that aren't fun manifestations, but we still need to manifest them. And there's the power of emotions either way, whether we're manifesting something that's awesome and joyful, and it's so easy to get into the energy of emotions about those things because it's so fun to think about them. And then there are other manifestations that we have to do that are part of sustaining our lives here, that are part of, keeping a certain sense of balance in our lives in whatever way, giving us a sense of strength and vitality to our lives. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's always fun things to do, right? It's like cleaning your room or cleaning out the garage. Some people get absolute joy doing that, but
me.
Like Lacy, and I in particular do not. And so if I were to vision this awesome Saturday experience of I can't wait to go clean out my garage, and I'm visualizing how wonderful it feels to move this box over here and that box over here and all the heavy lifting and all the exciting aspects of that, I'm just not really feeling that. So when I think of things like that, you can still use emotion to have the end result, right? The end result is the awesome, completely organized garage in this example that you can find everything, you know where everything is, everything has its place. And so we're using emotion, whether it's something we're manifesting that totally excites us and it's like the best thing in our life that we could ever envision manifesting, or whether it's something that we just need to have done in our life and we really are thrilled about the end result of that experience.
Well, and I'm going to add something here that I don't know that I've heard anybody talk about, but I'm going to sort of insert it as something you and I have come up with, which is also the concept of removing your energy from a particular visualization or manifestation that you want not to happen. So in other words, let's use this tax example you gave, because you and I had an experience with that was really powerful.
Yeah.
One year we needed a new car. And we weren't sure how that was going to happen. And we'll talk about how it's important to not focus on the house. But one of the ways it could have happened was with a tax refund check. And you really believed and visualized this car, and you really visualized this tax refund in that particular year covering the cost of that new car.
I could feel both equally with a tremendous amount of joy. I really could. I could feel the refund, the tax refund that I was giddy about because I knew it was going to pay. I didn't know how we were going to get the refund. I just knew we were going to have this awesome refund. So again, this is exactly what Mike Dooley's talking about. You don't have to know how you're going to get the refund. You just are having the refund. And so I was able to picture that, Lacy, with a lot of emotion, and I could feel joy about the refund that was coming, and I just already knew I had it, and I was very excited about the new car. We definitely shopped for the new car. We talked about the new car. We talked with the kids about the new car. We all talked about the color of the car. How did we feel in the car? We test drove cars. We didn't have the how of the car in our bank account yet, but we had the joy of manifesting it and thinking about it and knowing it was already a part of our experience because energetically it already was. So I'm just saying I had emotion about both of those things.
Right.
Having the car and the tax refund made me, in particular, very happy.
And I could not get into the energy of believing in that tax refund. I think I just had too much knowledge about the numbers of our particular year and our income and our expenses, and I just could not imagine that we were going to get that tax refund. And I really was aware that I could not get into the energy that you were in about that refund. And so because we know these principles, you and I talked about it a lot. And we said, okay, so what we're going to do now is, Lacy, you're going to get out. You're going to get out of the vision. Right. You know, you're going to let go. You're not going to put any of your energy into it, negative or positive.
Just get neutral.
Absolutely get neutral. And I really was able to remove my energy from that tax refund altogether. So I didn't think about it. I didn't pay attention to the date of April 15th. It was out of my awareness. I was successfully able to pull myself completely out of that.
And I went on my merry way. I absolutely kept merrily thinking about this new car that I already knew was ours. And I kept feeling about the tax refund that I could absolutely tangibly feel in our experience. Although, obviously, as we're talking about this podcast, it was not yet in our experience. We hadn't even filed our taxes yet, but I knew it already was there. And so that's something that you're pointing out, Lacy, is if there's a partnership, right? Especially if you have multiple people trying to manifest something and someone doesn't quite have the level of belief, or they're in some kind of negative spin with themselves. Resistance. There is this awareness that you can remove your energy and just let the people who have that volume of energy and that excitement about whatever it is, let them keep communicating with the universe. And all you have to do is get neutral, where you're not putting out signals either way,
right,
and it can still come. And of course, as we tell this story on the podcast today, the tax refund absolutely came, and the car was purchased about within a week of the tax refund. It was miraculous.
No. It was like within cents. Like the refund was
It was within at least $200, and that's with taxes. You know how they say taxes, title, all those extra charges, the extra floor mats or whatever it was, everything included. It was within $200. Exactly.
Yeah.
It was really
Unbelievable.
unreal. And again, these are just experiences like Mike Dooley says, when you have these experiences, it isn't luck. It's the law.
Right.
It's the law of attraction and these other universal laws that are working together as much as the law of gravity is at work all the time. And Mike Dooley talks about that.
Yes.
I don't know that we're going to talk about that today, but the law of gravity is a certainty in this world.
Right.
And when you throw a ball up, it's going to come down. Right?
Right.
Whether you like the ball, whether you have happy feelings about the ball, whether you are angry at the ball, the universe, in terms of the law of gravity, doesn't care. You throw a ball up and it's going to come down, and Mike Dooley illustrates that as well. And the same thing is true for the law of attraction and these other universal principles that are summoning into our experience which we think about. So if you're angry about something you're thinking about, and if you're celebrating something you're thinking about, the universe is listening all the time.
That's right. That's right.
All the time.
And it gets me so excited. I mean, we have two big things on our vision board now, and I'm not going to talk about them right now. We'll get to them maybe at the end of the podcast, but maybe we can enlist our listeners to help
manifest.
group manifest and join our vision. So let's get to the bottom of these last couple visualization guidelines that Mike Dooley outlines. The fifth one is to put yourself in the picture of what you are visioning. So this is interesting. You and I were talking about this last night, and so many people know how to visualize something that they want, something they desire, a beach house or a car or a house or a relationship, whatever it is. But we forget to actually put ourselves in the vision,
Right.
to put ourselves in the movie reel,
Yeah.
that it's not, we're not just visualizing that thing to come to us. Right? We are
Or
actually
that thing outside of us.
right. We are actually it. We are actually with it. We are an integral part of
We are
the vision.
in the vision with it. We are having the experience of it.
Exactly. So it's like you in your life, you are in your life playing out like a movie screen, and you are a character in that, and
You're in the receiving and the experiencing of it. The key is that you are living and having that experience.
yes, and
In the vision.
I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that you've recently realized that sometimes
I've often realized, but I'm such a feeler. And so when I look back at point number 4, I have enough energy of emotion to create planets
Yes.
in the cosmos.
I can attest to that.
So that is my strongest visualization skill, right? I can feel in every detail how I want to be living whatever that experience is that I'm trying to manifest. I am less of a visual person. I wouldn't have said that about myself, because I'm such a strong feeler who can feel the vision. But I'm telling you, and as we're teaching this on the podcast, there is something very different when you literally visualize yourself in having the experience. That is something I don't do as much as I feel myself in the experience. I feel myself having the experience with so much emotion. It must compensate for the fact that I don't always visually put myself. I think when we manifested the beach house, I actually don't have any memory of seeing myself in the house.
I have enough of that ability for the two of us.
Okay, so
if
you
you have
see
the
yourself
emotion,
there.
I have the visualization skills.
Okay, so that's amazing. And obviously, if you're listening to this and you don't have a partner that's manifesting with you, you could just call this into your awareness, and you could be aware if you have both of these skills or if you have one more than the other, and just keep that in your awareness. And I know that if I really want something and I really wanted to turbocharge it, I would start making a conscious effort to put myself actually in the vision when I know that I don't naturally do that. And so again, as we become more seasoned manifestors and more seasoned visioners, we learn more about who we are and what our natural abilities are and how we can make that process better. And so it's really a learning about yourself process.
Yeah.
This whole thing is about learning about you.
Yes. Wonderful. Okay, and on to our sixth and final guideline outlined by Mr. Dooley, and that is really important as well, and that is to dwell upon the end result and beyond. versus dwelling upon how it's going to happen. So we referenced this a little bit earlier when we talked about focusing on the end result exclusively. But this is really important because we really want to see it as if it's already happened. We really want to know it already is. And we are not worrying about or focusing on how it's going to happen. And we're going to go into next about that. But that's
he says, don't ever mess with the cursed house, right? And we are going to talk about that. Which he actually also says, Lacy, that it's in contrast to what we've been conditioned to believe.
Yes.
In a very linear world on this planet, there's, money doesn't grow from trees. How are you going to make that happen? There's a lot of these questions of like, you need to think that through, right? And so we're conditioned to believe that we have to come up with the hows. We have to figure it out before we ever start. And when you play in the quantum energies of the universe, we have to uncondition ourselves from that way of thinking. We have to free ourselves from that way of thinking. And you completely skip all those steps, which actually is what makes it so much more fun. It's not that much fun. Like if I were to sit there and think about all my tax forms or tax deductions or donations or all the different ways I could maximize my tax refund, I would have just been depressed, or I don't know, but it would not have been fun to do something like that. And I frankly don't have the financial knowledge of tax codes and all the options available to me, nor do I even know if my accountant did. I don't think, and obviously the point is we didn't have to. I just had to know the end result, that I had that tax refund. That was its own visualization. That was not it sounds like it was the how. But I felt the house so strongly that I knew it as a vision. I can't explain it. I just knew it. And so the point I guess I'm trying to make here is with a tax example is, focusing on the end result only and not focusing on the cursed house that Mike Dooley talks about is essential. And it's a retraining of our entire way of thinking, that all we have to do is think about how we feel living the experience we want to be manifesting, or having the item or resource that we really desire. And we don't have to get tangled up in all the hows, because that can take you down a rabbit hole, getting tangled up in the hows, right? So focus on the end result and don't mess with the house. That is definitely Mike Dooley's probably most critical point of all.
Exactly. He just says never spend time on figuring out how you will get to that end result. Just focus on the end result.
Exactly.
And he also says, which I love, he says the hows are the domains of the universe. So meaning that it is absolutely not our job to figure out the steps in how it's all going to come to pass. It is the universe's job, the energies of the universe that are going to co-conspire with us to bring us what it is we need to move forward. It's like, that day when I ran into that old childhood friend in Costco who's a mortgage broker at the time that we were manifesting the beach house was a perfect example of that. I couldn't have scripted it any better, but the universe did.
Right.
And so he talks about two big points about he calls them the cursed hows. So if we focus on how we're going to create something to happen or come into our experience, or if we worry about making something happen, we then start to experience kind of the feeling that we're carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders. And I love how he voices this. He says, you will saddle the dream with the responsibility of making it happen, right? You will saddle the dream with the responsibility of making it happen. So if you're getting into all this great energy of focusing on the end result and loving and wanting and enjoy about what it is you're trying to create, and then you throw in the energy of worrying about how you're going to do it, how you're going to push through it, how you're going to make it happen.
He says you hit the proverbial wall.
You hit the proverbial wall.
Yeah.
And it can't come.
Right.
It simply can't come. And so he also talks about how your inner circuitry is telling you in those moments that you can't have what you want, right? Because you're so consumed with, well, how am I going to make it happen? You take on the responsibility of being the one to make it happen. And now you're set up, it's almost like a setup for failure. And that can often lead to a sense of powerlessness and depression and things like that. So if you are able to, the whole goal is to be able to really turn the how over to the universe. Let the universe figure out how it's going to come to be. And your job is simply to focus on the end result. That's where it gets really fun, when you understand these things.
It does get really fun. I just have to smile that I said this to you when we were viewing this film. But I see that scene in the film Finding Nemo, where obviously in the beginning of the film, for anybody who's seen that movie, the father Marlin tells his son Nemo, "You just can't do these things, Nemo," right? Which is kind of what happens sometimes when we're trying to figure out the how. We're hitting those walls. You just can't do these things, Nemo. Right. And that's kind of how we end up talking to ourselves, because our linear minds we do not have access with our mental minds to the unlimited potential and all the resources that the universe has. Our little minds and our little selves don't have access to that amount. So the response from our egos and the response from our minds is, you just can't have these things. You just can't do these things. And I think the irony in that film that I'm just now realizing, sorry for my little giggle here, but by Marlin telling Nemo that he just can't do those things, right? The universe created the how that Marlin was going to do all those things and more, right? Having to go out into the huge ocean and have all those experiences to find Nemo, recover Nemo, and confirm to himself that we can do all these things and more. Yes. Right. So the universe created the how that Marlin was going to have to grow through in that story, to show to himself that we can have all those things.
Yes.
We can do all these things. But when we try and figure it out with our little selves, then sometimes more difficult things happen.
Exactly.
Right? More challenges happen. It gets more arduous, and you're playing less and you're working harder, and disappointment grows, like you said, and what Mike Dooley says, and feelings of depression and disappointment enter in, and it's not very fun to manifest under those circumstances.
This may be a good time, Marie, to tell the story about the finding a school for our kids.
Yeah. So, I don't know if we've said this on the podcast, but we did homeschool our kids for a period of years. And there was coming a time where our oldest was finishing his 8th grade year, and we knew that a time was coming to have a different experience than homeschooling. So essentially go back to some version of some kind of public or private school. And our finances and the resources in our area were such that private school probably wasn't going to happen. So we started to, and we were engaged with the laws of the universe and visioning and manifesting our lives. And so we knew, but we couldn't conceive of what this was. This was something where we could see the beach house clearly, we could see the car clearly. There were certain things that we could see very clearly. This was one of these that we had to put a little more awareness into, of what is it that we're actually wanting to feel when he is in the experience of this new high school experience, and he's in a public school of some kind, right? How does that feel to us? How are we living that experience? And so we put his name in some lotteries, local lotteries for charter schools. We also started looking at some alternative public schools, and we started considering moving, because in the district we were in, we just weren't interested in the public school that we were zoned for. So to make this story, it is a long story, but it's a beautiful story. I'll try and make it shorter, is that we ended up finding a house in the school district where several other families that we knew had homeschoolers who had successfully transitioned back into a public school. It was in the same county, but it was in the next town over, which meant we had to move. So, of course, that's what we're thinking at this point. The point I'm trying to make is we started to fill in the how, instead of trusting the universe to bring the how, because this was really important to us, and it happens to the best of us. We can vision for years, and these things can still crop up. So in this circumstance, we found a house in the school district that we wanted to move to. We were willing to sell the house that we were in to create this next chapter in our family's life. And once our son got into that school, our other kids were going to be able to go there, and it was this plan for the future, and we thought it was all going to line up. And And after we got under contract, and after we passed that due diligence period where you can get out of your contract, we actually found out that our son got into the lottery of a school that, it's just, there's only 100 spots, and he got one of those spots. And it was a perfect match to who he was, to who he is. And all of a sudden we realized that we had pushed through the hows instead of trusting the universe, because it always knows the best, easiest, fastest, best match for us in the vision we're having, far beyond what we can see. It knows far beyond what we can understand or know. And that is true. This is a living, conscious, intelligent universe. And so now the end of this story, at least for the podcast right here, is that here we were thinking that we were going to create all these opportunities for the universe to create the how, but we were still trying to create the how. We were doing it because we really anticipated this change. We knew that we had to move into this next experience for our family. And here we were under contract for a house that once he got into the school that was completely in the opposite direction, right? That we didn't need to move at all. In fact.
Right.
And there were other variables as part of that just all of a sudden we quickly started to see what have we gotten ourselves into, and other things didn't line up with that move, but yet we were under contract. So then we had to use visioning principles and trusting the universe to get us out of that contract to be able to fully engage what had opened up for us, which the vision was a new school for our children for high school. And that's what we were focused on.
But it wasn't just a vision for a new school. It was a vision for a new school that was right for our particular children. And there were parameters around that we had envisioned.
We had envisioned
a smaller school, a school that had the arts. We had some ideas about what that school would be. And I also want to say, there was some kind of underlying resistant vibration around, or energy around, moving, because we really did love this house and we really do love the town we're in. So there was, I think, I'll speak for me.
You can look in hindsight.
I can look in hindsight and see there was a part of me that didn't really want to move. But I know that we're telling this story because it's an example of kind of pushing through with an agenda to make a vision happen that we think is the way to go.
Well, it's kind of like saying, if the universe doesn't have my back, if for some reason the universe isn't going to take care of this, I have to take care of this.
Right.
And I think that's what we were saying. We have all these options for we have all these buckets that the universe could make happen, make manifest for us. But just in case they don't do it, the universe doesn't do it right.
Right.
I'm going to buy this other house and
right.
I'm going to create all this change in my family's life
right.
because I need to make sure that I have that school. I need to know that that's in place for our family.
Because that, in our mind, was the best school was a good fit in our mind for our kid at that time. But in the end, it absolutely wasn't. There was a better option.
Well, and we couldn't even know how good the option was that manifested for him, that he got into that lottery, that there ended up being teachers at that school that completely put him on his life path, and our other son, and now our daughter. So, but we could have had no idea because we didn't know that information about the school. We just were putting, his name in different lotteries for
True.
different options. So we couldn't have known yet that was going to be as perfect as it was. But that's the point. The universe knows what's perfect.
Always.
Always. In an exponential, like ripples of time outward of like knowing just how perfect that was and just how perfectly he was going to be one of the students whose name was pulled up in the lottery. So when you don't know that, obviously when we didn't know he had gotten into the lottery and we didn't know all these amazing teachers that were going to be there, we stepped in with some level of trying to create the how on our own, even though we were saying we trust the universe, it's going to work it out, but we were still taking steps in the way of I don't trust,
right,
in some way.
Well, we paid a lot of money to have that lesson.
And, sometimes you do pay some money to learn some lessons.
Yeah.
And in that situation, we did. We paid a price to learn that lesson, but I call it tuition in the realm of the Earth School and evolving in our paths here. I have not made that mistake again. Like
Yeah.
it is something that we always, if we ever feel that kind of energy of pushing at something come up again, all we have to do is look at each other and say, remember,
Yeah.
remember that big bill we had to pay
Yeah.
for never moving.
Right.
We paid a moving bill and we never moved.
Right,
So
right.
sometimes that can be one of your greatest teachers too. And you learn.
Yes.
And then you share this information with other people. So I think to go back and reiterate, Lacy, what you were saying is don't saddle the dream with the cursed house.
Right.
Don't put the weight of having to figure out how. Again, like he says, focus on the end result. Focus on how you're feeling when you're in the experience of the dream or the desire that you want.
Right.
So
Exactly. And the second thing, and you've already kind of alluded to it several times, but the second obstacle that he talks about or the cursed house promote is limiting the universe. When we start to worry about the hows, we limit an otherwise unlimited universe.
it's so powerful.
It is
It's
so
true.
powerful. The universe always knows the quickest way to get you to your dreams. But if you get bogged down in the how, you slam the door shut on the dream and all the possibilities.
Right. It's exactly, and I think it might say that our insistence on something limits the universe. Insisting that we know better,
Right.
insisting something. We're like all of a sudden putting all these constraints on the universe that has an infinite amount of resources.
Right.
And I don't know if you were going to say this, but I really took for the film where he talks about, when you start to limit it, when you start to saddle the dream, when you start to try and figure out the hows, you're making this huge dream smaller. And you add your judgments in there about what is possible, what is not possible, which goes back to what we talked about with the tax refund and the car that we were able to manifest. Lacy was initially making that dream smaller. You were putting limits on how it could happen. And in that scenario, which worked beautifully, as you said, I got to get out. I'm out. I'm going to get to neutral and you keep going. Right. And so but he talks in this concept of don't limit the universe. Don't add your judgments about what is possible and what isn't. And he gives this example of how many people do you know? Right. And I'm asking the audience, think about that. How many people do you know? Do you know 10 people? Do you know 50 people? Do you know 200 people, 500, 1,000 people maybe in your network of extended connections and contacts? Well, how many people does the universe know? Right? About 7 billion, right?
Right.
And so just think about the contrast between those things. When you think through all your contacts, right, that you're going to manifest something through these particular connections, and you try and think your way in this little, well, I have to have lunch with this person so I can have dinner with this person, and by breakfast the next day, I'll have it all figured out. Right?
Right.
But the universe might know somebody across the world, right? Across oceans that is like the perfect match for whatever it is that you're needing, or a particular product or a particular connection, whatever it is. And we can't possibly know that amount of people, that amount of resources. And so we can't put limits on an unlimited universe or we get limited results. Right. And that's what we had funneled ourselves into with that potential house that we almost moved into for the school. We had surveyed the scenario. Our minds had said, there's all these ways, but I'm at least going to have this backup plan of this way. And and so that's what started manifesting, this smaller way. Right. And I started funneling into this house scenario. And but the universe had much bigger plans and a much bigger impact and a much more perfect match than we could have imagined. So don't limit the universe.
Right. Amen.
Don't limit.
Amen. And so those are the two obstacles he talks about when we get ourselves engaged in trying to make things happen in the cursed house.
Exactly.
So I know you and I could go on and on. We've reviewed the guidelines for visualization. We've reviewed the concept of the cursed house, and Mike Dooley rounds out in the film just how important it is to pay attention to both your words and your actions. And he says, really, because words have energy, and we've talked about this before, but we have to pay attention to what we are saying, what is coming out of our mouth, who are we talking to, and what are we talking about. No more pity parties, no more gossip, no more complaining. We've got to pay attention to what we're telling ourselves about ourselves, like our self-talk. What are we saying to ourselves in the mirror, so to speak?
Yeah.
And what are we saying to other people? What are we talking about? And we want to make sure that we are sort of in integrity, that our words and our feelings and our actions match, and they match the greater vision that we're trying to bring into our reality, that we are visioning, if that makes sense. And so paying attention to our spoken words and how we're speaking is so important.
Well, and he's talking about too, Lacy, how we go from thoughts that are inside us, right, which have energy and movement, and then we move into words, which are a slightly more intensified expression of those thoughts, because now we're taking it to another level in the words that we're speaking out into the world. And he talks about whatever you're talking about, you are bringing about. And remember, you have to always remember that the universe doesn't have an off button. And but another point I wanted to bring up just about that, and I know we're going to move on to the last concept that Mike Dooley talks about, but in terms of our words and what we're talking about, we're bringing about, we're human. And so we are going to have moments where fear triggers come up about something we desire. If it's something we really, 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 really want, we can trigger the heck out of ourselves, so that all of a sudden we get distracted with all the emotions and the triggers of our fear. And he said something about if the fear train activates, right? If you get on that track of the fear triggers, it's okay. Other people might teach like, that's terrible and your vision's never going to manifest. It happens to all of us. It happened to Lacy and I. So, but you just notice it. You say, oh, look at that. Look at what's getting triggered. And he said, and then you move into an offensive. There's a defensive position of just like becoming aware that you're triggered and your body's triggering into fear in response to what you're saying you want. And then you can move onto an entirely different offensive track of creating your life. Just create a different train, create a different track of energy and emotion and visioning that has you visioning it in more of the way that you want it. So you can let the fear come up, but you can also
switch tracks.
Right. And so being aware that your thoughts are always creating your experience. And so he talked about things that you can start thinking about with your words, telling yourself, my life is easy. My life is joyful. I always say the right thing to the right people at the right time, right? How many of us talk to ourselves or critique ourselves for saying the wrong thing, or why did you say that, or why did you do that? The universe is listening. The universe is listening to those judgments and that critical nature of how we're talking to ourselves and how we're feeling when we're talking to ourselves in that way. And so you either keep putting your foot in your mouth because you keep affirming that you keep doing that, or you switch tracks and something like Mike Dooley says, where I always say the right things at the right time to the right people. And he said, over time, if you just change how you're talking to yourself, your life begins to change and it begins to reflect what you're saying.
Yes. One of my favorites that he brought up that I've started to say a lot more is everything I touch turns to gold. Everything I touch turns to gold. There are many layers to that, but I love that one.
Yeah, and you get to play with things you want to say. He just gives some examples and we're just giving a few examples, but think about how you can change somehow you're talking to yourself and to other people differently.
Right. Exactly.
To be more in alignment with what you actually want to be experiencing versus sometimes the complaining or the self-critiquing that we're so used to.
Right.
Right? You have to form a new habit.
Yes, absolutely.
With our words.
And it's all about awareness in this process, in this journey of learning and listening to us, and we're still learning, and part of that awareness is paying attention to your words, but it's also paying attention to your actions, paying attention to your behaviors. Pay attention because your behaviors are going to give you clues about what you're thinking about.
Right.
And so, there's so much that we do every day. Scientists say we have over 60,000 thoughts a day. And if that is the case, those thoughts, every single one of those thoughts is impacting our energy field and is sending messages out into the universe. And if we have 60,000 thoughts a day, just imagine that. And imagine if we could actually learn to manage our thoughts and thus manage our energy field through this. So it's really gaining awareness into the words that we're speaking, but also into our behavior. What are we doing that is creating or paying into the vision that we want to step into? And a concept that he talks about, and I know other people talk about, especially Abraham Hicks, is the concept of acting as if. So as you are visioning and imagining, you are imagining that you already have everything that you are imagining. It already is, right? You never want to behave like your dream won't show up.
Yes.
I mean, that's just huge.
Right.
You never want to behave like your dream won't show up. In other words, always behave like your dream is already here.
And that the universe always delivers.
Right.
It always delivers.
And so there's a level of belief and trust in that. And we want to prepare for the inevitable arrival of what we are ordering from the universe.
Yes.
You know?
Right, exactly.
And so we are acting always as if, you know, this is another small example, but for the last 10 years, I have always imagined and visualized a pathway from our back porch door to our driveway. It's a highly trafficked area. And I've never known how to do it, don't have those skills, never known what to do, what I would need,
There's the cursed house, right?
Cursed house. And so, but the bottom line is, if anybody's seen my Facebook post recently, a friend came into my life who has all the skills needed to create that stone path, and
a generous heart that helped bring the tools and resources in every way to bring that into form. And you couldn't possibly, for the last 10 years, have known that that was going to be your how.
Right.
But the universe knew.
Right.
How that was, what your how was.
Right.
All you had to do is keep picturing what? The end result.
Right.
The stone pathway.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
And there it was. And so I think this acting as if, I know we may be going long on our conversation today, but this is a lot of information. And so we want to give a lot of different examples because it's kind of in the stories that I think many of us can connect with the principles. And I'll just make this brief, but Mike Dooley tells the story of someone who attends his workshops that came up to him and talked about manifesting a partner, manifesting a companion for their life, right? And so, was putting these principles into practice and living as if. And the way she did that was she was living as a single person in her home and started behaviorally acting as if she had this partner. So instead of pulling into the middle of her garage, she started parking on one side of the garage to make room for the partner that didn't exist yet, but she was feeling, and she said, oh, well, I need to leave that space for my partner. And then when she would go to sleep at night, she used to sleep in the middle of the bed, and she started moving to one side of the bed so that there was space for her partner, right? And she did a lot of those things. She cleared out her closet to make room for his clothes, right? And so this is the way, like, people don't often understand how to even pretend to be as if, but these are stories, and there are many stories of how you start pretending in your life like kids pretend. You have to get into that imagining space inside yourself. How would I be living if I already had this in my life? Right. Well, she would park on the right side of the garage, or the one side of the garage, and she would sleep on one side of the bed, and she would use half of the, bedroom closet. And so there are all kinds of ways that we can get creative with ourselves. And the more we play, the more that energy of emotion turbo boosts the vision and brings it into our experience in an even better, bigger, more joyful way. If that's how we're playing with the universe, and that's what we're spending time thinking about.
Right.
So it's so powerful.
All of this is so powerful. And I think, I know we're running out of time, but I don't know how you feel about this, Marie, but I would love to share with our listeners a little bit about the two visions that we have right now that we are putting energy into, that we are living as if has already happened, and certainly would ask our listeners to add to the vision of these two things. Because I'm going to tell you, we've had, I'm not kidding, I think we counted 13 vision boards over the last 15 years.
Yeah.
And do you know we only have one left? In other words, 12 have been folded up because all visions have been realized. Yes. All visions have been manifested.
Yes.
And so the current vision board really includes two very, very important things. Yeah. And I don't know if you want to talk about them or...
Well, yes. I mean, one of them right now, currently, we are acting as if And we are making a documentary that tells the story of a lot of your work, Lacy, and some very special people that went on a journey of personal transformation and transformed their lives using all of the principles that we are at least templating and creating an initial conversation with our listeners here at Whole Soul School and Foundation. These men actually went through a group experience where they went deep into all of these principles on a weekly basis for at least a minimum of a year. And they literally transformed their lives, right? And so we are making a film about their stories and their journeys of personal transformation, and also a larger pathway and bridge to personal transformation for other people seeking that level of change, that kind of positive shift in their life. And so we are super excited about it. And that's just something that we invite any of our listeners to group vision with us, that this film gets funded and this film gets made, and that these messages continue to be accessible to everyone in the world. We all need to remember this process, that these principles are available to all of us.
And I think what's important to mention about the film is that it's been a vision that we've held for a while as a vehicle to tell these stories and to inspire humanity. We are in the pre-production phase of this process. Again, not really focusing on the how, but we have just been interviewing. We've conducted 4 or 5 film shoots in which we've been interviewing people who we know are going to be in the larger film, and we are wrapping up what we're calling our pitch video, which is going to be used to fundraise to make the larger film. And so it's really happening. You know, we talked about it for so long, so
we thought about it for a long time, then we spoke about it for a long time. We're still thinking about it and speaking about it in all the positive ways we know how. And then in the last, year to 2 years, we've been actually taking the action steps, which is the energy in motion, that is the extension of our thoughts and our words now. And so we are in the universe, and Mike Dooley says this, and I think it's important to bring this back in, Lacy, where if you have to be out there in the world if you want to make things happen. So that's where the action comes in. You can vision inside all you want, and that is a part of the process. But unless you're taking action and you're showing up in the world, being and living that energy, that dream.
But it's important to say it's not action to make things happen.
I didn't mean to say that.
You didn't,
okay.
You didn't. I just want to clarify that.
Okay. Yeah, you have to be out there in the world for things to happen and to manifest.
Yes.
And so he says this very, very brilliantly, I think. He says, if you want the universe to do all it can with what it has and from where it is, then you must also do all that you can from what you've got and from where you are.
Yes.
And that is exactly, so this is another level of visioning and manifesting that we're going through. This is a big dream. We've never made a documentary film before. We don't know all the hows. We really don't. But we do know the end result, which is this film going out and people experiencing it and hearing these stories and being inspired and beginning to seek more of these principles for themselves because they see the living possibility and the positive potential that is meant for them too. And so all of this
sort of leads to the second vision.
Oh, okay.
That we've got going on, right?
Oh, okay.
Which is the largest vision of all, which is a holistic spiritual center in which we are teaching these classes, we are doing workshops, we are conducting immersion retreats, we have a film studio, we have
we are making inspirational conscious films about where light is working in the world, where manifesting is working in the world, where things are being created for the greater good, right?
Yes.
And where people are working cohesively and collaboratively together to bring about those kinds of manifestations from a place of joy and from a place of love. So we have that vision, and I always vision the center, Lacy, as pulsing frequency. We are literally broadcasting these positive frequencies out into the world from our studio, from our center, through our classes, through our online courses. But we really vision this physical space. So we're going to make this documentary film that's going to travel the globe, right, to touch people all over the world, right? And we also want the hub and the space where we can continue to create videos and content so the people who can't travel to us and programming, who people who can't travel to us can still access it from wherever they are.
Right.
And then also to have a physical space where people can physically attend a class and experience more of what some of the men who will be in this film and the speakers in the film experience for themselves. Sometimes some people, to learn and to take in information, they do want to physically experience that kind of in an immersion type experiential learning environment. So these are two of our things that we are visioning and manifesting. And I just want to say, we don't know the how. Right. We don't know the how. The universe knows the how, and it's not our job to know the how. We couldn't possibly shoulder the burden of the how, of those big visions. This isn't just a car. Right. I'm not trying to manifest a cup of coffee here. But I will also say the universe doesn't know the difference between visioning and manifesting a cup of coffee to come into your experience and, a $10 million estate or retreat center or school or campus. It doesn't know the difference between those two things. It only knows what you're thinking about. And then it gets to work to bring it to you. And so our job is to do what we've done with all the other things that we've mentioned today, is just keep loving that end result. We have to learn from that property where we spent a lot of money to move and never move, because we don't want to manifest that way. We want to really trust the universe and now know that it's going to bring itself to us. It's going to make a way for us. And all we have to do is keep loving teaching and keep loving sharing and keep loving talking with people and sharing this information and seeing lives change. So we're going to keep holding those visions. We're going to keep merrily visioning our end result and sort of gleefully having these experiences of the life we want to be living as if it's now. Right? As if it's now.
Well, and I think it's important.
And it is now.
It is now. And I just want to add, Whole Soul School and Foundation, is our spiritual hub right now. It is the place where we are teaching and educating and sharing these concepts. Right. This podcast itself, these stories, is the energy of the center, which we are creating, which we are.
Right, which are the thoughts that became words, that became actions, that are all working together to bring more of this about, right? In a more joyful way. So exactly, we are living as if we are embodying it now. And that's something else over time. The more you vision, the more you get practice at actually being what you say you desire, taking the conscious action steps that come from the seeds you planted and the thoughts you were thinking that grows your garden.
Right.
The action steps are the garden of the seeds. Or I think Kevin Foster, he said it some way, right? That we are the parents of the child that we'll have in the future. Is that what he said? He said something on the transformation talks, but it's all the same kind of thing. From the seeds of our thoughts to the waterings of our words, right? To the garden that we will eventually harvest from. We are in the process of creating that whole experience through our thoughts, words, and actions. And I would just say Mike Dooley really, really just beautifully articulates in a very step-by-step way in this film how to engage that process. When a lot of people say, well, how do I engage the process? Well, there's that cursed how again. But Mike Dooley says this is how you do it. And so it's a great film for anybody listening to actually check it out. We own this film, but interestingly, before we went to view this film, somehow some gremlin in our house, likely us, put it somewhere that we can't find it. So we too had to go online in the last couple of days and purchase it to stream it so that we could watch it and be prepared for this conversation today. So it's where did we get it from? Amazon Prime. We found it on Amazon Prime. I think it was $2.99 to rent or $9.99 to purchase. And so we also, we're going to close this out, I promise, because this is going to be a longer podcast than we ever intended. But it's a lot of information and a lot of exciting stuff that we had put in our newsletter that we were going to be talking about the Opus this month. That movie as well seems to have been, I think they're together. I'm not sure where
they fell through a portal.
Those two movies fell through a portal. I'm not quite sure where and how, but they will return at some point. And I'll just say that The Opus is another fabulous film told more in a like fictionalized but teaching type story style.
Docudrama.
It's a docudrama.
Done by Doug Vermeeren.
Right, done by Doug Vermeeren, Lacy, and you showed and taught that for many years in your groups in the prison system. So that's another one to find and to experience if you want to supplement this conversation that we've had today, and you want to just have more of that experience, because being in the experience of these films puts you in the vibration of having, puts you in the vibration of you being a conscious creator in your life. So the more you spend time with these resources, the more you become that too.
Right.
So, Lacy, thank you. I think this is a great conversation today.
Yeah, thank you. I love sharing our stories, because we get so into the energy of stories, and hopefully our listeners will enjoy them as well, and can tap into their own visions and their own goals. And now you've got a little bit more of a process by which to manifest your dreams into reality.
Exactly. So this is a point in our program that I invite everybody to come to our website at wholesoulschoolandfoundation.org. Visit us on Facebook, where we put weekly, twice a week, we put these soulful reminders of usually quotes from the films that we're covering each month, as well as some wonderful poetry by our friend Flower Diamond. She's just got some extraordinary ways with words, interestingly, that we've just talked about, thoughts become things. And Flower Diamond actually paints those energies in motion. She paints those words on a page to support you in taking your action steps and living your best life. So find us on Facebook to access those at Whole Soul School and Foundation. I think the page actually comes up with Whole Soul School. And if you have questions or comments or topics that you'd like to see covered in some of our upcoming podcasts, in the Transformation Talks, or also in the Fireside Chats, we also have some more podcast categories that are coming. We just need to invent more time in the day to make them happen. You're welcome to email us at wholesoulschool@gmail.com. And was that
our
it?
YouTube channel.
And our YouTube channel, of course, if you're listening, you might be listening to us on YouTube. And we are on Twitter, and we're trying to get ourselves over to Instagram. We just need to make some time to do that. So we do have an account. We're just not active there yet. And I think that's it. So I think this is a lot of information for you to sort of absorb, take in, play with, have fun with, learn from, and allow yourself to become willing to try it out, to try it on. Right?
Absolutely. And I think, the last thing I would say that you normally say, Marie, is if you feel so moved, please consider donating to Whole Soul School and Foundation. Your donation is 100% tax deductible, and it helps us keep everything, it keeps the lights on, and keeps us
and helps us with the equipment. Eventually we see having a social media staff where we can turn over the video editing and those things to other people to handle that for us, where it's their joy to do that kind of work.
Right. And obviously just keep our visioning of the documentary and of the center that we want to create. We want Whole Soul School and Foundation to turn into a physical form, and your donations would certainly help to that end as well.
Yes, and I would distinguish that the film may not be actually produced and made by Whole Soul School and Foundation. It's probably going to be with our other business entities, but the campus and the center is definitely going to be, through Whole Soul School and Foundation. And so, really we're just asking for people to hold the light of that vision with us, stay excited and engaged in that vision with us. There are many people who are going to be a part of that center with us. This is not going to be the Lacy and Marie show. There's going to be many other people who know these principles that are going to put their unique offerings in the world through the center that we've envisioned for many, many years now. So we're super excited about it. That's all our job is stay excited and focused on what we're creating. We invite you to stay centered and focused in your 5 to 10 minutes a day, once a day, that Mike Dooley talks about, and feel it with feeling, and put yourself in the vision and picture the end result. So it's always a joy to talk with our listeners. We love that we see more and more people coming and seeing our videos. And please share with people who you think might benefit from these conversations. And know that over time, we're going to have many more other categories and conversations that might touch on other things you have interest in. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful week. We'll see you again in July. So have a wonderful few weeks, everyone. Blessings.